There you go, live on YouTube. I'm gonna be live on LinkedIn in a second. Live on LinkedIn. 210th episode of Thinker's Frequency. Just 1 second, folks. Just 1 second. Just 1 second. There we go. Live on LinkedIn. Live on LinkedIn. Yeah. Perfecto. Live on LinkedIn, that's good. Now let me just share this message with people on WhatsApp. There it goes to people on WhatsApp. There you go. 210th episode. 210th episode. Time flies, man. 210 episodes. Wow. Yeah. There you go. Live on YouTube, live on LinkedIn. Messages to people sent. Perfect. Perfect. Now let's have the show that we deserve. Let's have the show that we deserve, folks. The show that we deserve. Are you here? Should we begin? Can you hear me? Let me do a sound check on YouTube. I got sound good on YouTube. Let me do it on LinkedIn. Yeah, LinkedIn is good. That means we are ready. We are ready to have the show that we deserve. The show that we deserve. The show that makes everything worth it. The show of all shows. Thinker's Frequency. Let's do it. Bum bum bum. Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Thinker's Frequency. We're having such a good time. This is the peak of human civilization. We're working so hard, doing such good work for ourselves, our parents, our kids, our siblings, our husbands, our wives, our friends, everybody. Well, not other people's husbands and wives, I hope. And just when we thought things couldn't get any better, like they couldn't possibly get any better, well, they just did. Call it divine intervention, folks, but things just got a whole lot better. Now we have Thinker's Frequency, our daily mental workout, our daily dose of insights and analysis that don't lead to paralysis right before we punch in. So let's continue with our journey of reading between the lines, things that are especially interesting and important in the world of business and finance. Let's go! Oh, but before we go, we gotta follow tradition, right? You know the tradition. You know the sweet and sacred tradition of the simultaneous sip. We'll all sip something together, and it'll bring us good luck, as it always does without fail every day. And all you need for the simultaneous sip is a cup or mug, a glass, a tank, a chalice, a stein, a canteen jug, a flask, or a vessel of any kind. Pour it with your favorite liquid. I like some hot water with black pepper in it. Today I've got some more herbs. And there we go. Oh my god, nice. Beautiful. Let's do it again. Sublime. You know what the simultaneous sip says, right? You know what it says? It says that you are not alone. It says that we are in this together, which is such a beautiful thing to say. With that out of the way, let's begin. Did I say weekly mental, daily mental? I hope I said weekly because it's weekly now. It's muscle memory, 200 days of daily, it gets on your tongue. Mr. Tushar Tiwari says, new look, haircut. Yeah, I went bald, man. I went bald, Mr. Tiwari. It's liberating. It's a lot of fun, actually. It's just amazing. Although it's very awkward to show it here. If I do that, it's gonna be very weird. So I'll not do that. But yeah, it's awesome. For 1.5 years, I had these long hair, and now was the time to just take them away. So, last week was obviously very complicated, but before we get into the whole war situation, I just read this book. This book, can you see it? The Uncool by Mr. Cameron Crowe. It's a beautiful book, a beautiful autobiography, memoir of sorts. Memoir, that's how it's pronounced. Uh, of Mr. Cameron Crowe. Cameron Crowe is the director. My chance to get viral. Do you want to get? Do you want me to get viral? Whoa! No, I should not do that. I should not do that. You know, I have to look at these videos after they're out, right? Just to see. Oh my God, that'll be awkward. But yeah, it's fun. It's a lot of fun actually. I would highly recommend it. But yeah, so Cameron Crowe is the director of Jerry Maguire, the beautiful film Jerry Maguire, Almost Famous, We Bought a Zoo. So Jerry Maguire and Almost Famous are huge, extraordinary books. Sorry, movies. Jerry Maguire has obviously got a seriously big cultural contribution, but so has Almost Famous. This the Uncool is a reference to the Almost Famous, and it's a great movies set of movies, and this is a beautiful book. So if you haven't watched Jerry Maguire, Tom Cruise, you should definitely do it. It's a great movie. And of course, Almost Famous is my all time favorite movie. That's why I picked this book up because I like this guy so much. And I wasn't disappointed. He has a very good story to tell. And he has told it in a very beautiful way. So, good book. Thankful. Now, let's move on to what has happened in the last week or so. We've been talking about the whole Iran situation. We've talked about that. We said if these things sort of get screwed, what will happen, right? And we tried to predict where these things will go. So let's take a roundup of the second order effects and what happened because of the whole situation, right? So Iran, uh, the war happened. Of course, these people killed Khamenei, the leader, the supreme leader of Iran. Now, when that happened, right? Some people said, "Is that why you got bald to, for condolences?" No, I did not do that. But yeah, so that happened. So the whole Strait of Hormuz, which is the small part, the strait which essentially leads to 20% of the world's oil trade, right? One fifth of oil trade of the world got skewed. The interesting part is Chinese vessels have not been flagged by Iranians. So Iranians are letting everybody go but the Chinese. So Chinese, they're letting nobody go but the Chinese. So they're letting the Chinese vessels off. However, everybody else is screwed, right? So that's what's going on. They're saying that they're gonna blow up every ship that comes through the through the Strait of Hormuz. So what these people are trying to do is they're trying to move from the Cape of Good Hope, which is obviously a very long play to go. Now, this is leading to second order effects of all sorts, right? Now, where do you think this is gonna pan out? Very interesting to just imagine as a thought exercise on what this leads to, right? Obviously, if shipments are stopped, right, the oil prices will go up. That's very obvious. The oil prices will go up because the whole oil game, the West Asia, you know, this is where all the oil comes from. And if that's supplied, so 20% of that sort of gets a blockade of sorts, you might expect the oil prices to go up. Now that's exactly what happened. Brent went up, right? It might just be touching. It's like went up by 19% since this whole thing. 19%. That's a huge factor, of course. Now, if that has gone up, like if Brent goes up, if crude goes up, what happens? right? Just start thinking very very fast, okay? Now, what happens if Brent goes up? Can you guess? Like if Brent goes up, right? The crude oil goes up. What happens when the crude goes up? Okay? Now let's come to oil marketing companies like Indian Oil, HPCL, BPCL. What do you think will happen to companies like Indian Oil, HPCL, BPCL? I'll give you 2 seconds, right? What happens? What happens to oil marketing companies when Brent goes up? When the crude goes up, what happens? Oil marketing companies, I'm just gonna wait for 5 more seconds. You can think about it. Think about it. So, very important, but you got to be quick because we got to discuss a lot of second order effects and how these things pan out. So, you got to be very, very spick and span, right? As Mr. Wolf says. So, nobody has answers to where the what will happen to the oil marketing companies? Nothing. So they will obviously get hurt because oil marketing companies, the final price of petrol and diesel, the retail price of the petrol and diesel doesn't move so quickly, and because the raw material goes up, import costs go up. Mr. Bhavik Shah says, so oil marketing companies go bad, right? So that's definitely true, right? Oil refineries. What do you think of oil refineries? Oil refineries go up, right? They benefit because of the higher crude play. Then, of course, what do you think happens to trades or like companies dependent on oil imports? Wherever oil imports are huge, right? Let's say paint companies, they're gonna feel sad because they depend on a lot of crude, right? FMCG companies, they're gonna face problems, right? Because a lot of things are petroleum products and petroleum derivatives, right? Then what do you think happens to the agri players? Agri players also get hurt because Qatar makes LNG, liquid nitrogen gas, and liquid natural gas, and that particular gets hurt, right? That essentially that market gets hurt, and as that gets hurt, the agri guys, the urea producers, and so on and so forth, they feel the heat, right? So that becomes tough, right? The agri market, essentially, this is the Kharif season. Kharif season is about 60% of the entire country's food production, right? Sowing period. Now, if agri fertilizers and all of these derivatives get hurt, you obviously have food sowing to be difficult. If food sowing is going to get difficult, it's going to get affected. What you're going to see is food inflation across the play, but that's for the future. For now, you will have problems when it comes to the FMCG and paint supplies and so on and so forth. Now, what do you think happens to metals? Can you think about what happens to metals? Right? Anything that you can think, metals actually benefit, right? Metals have been benefiting. We told you, if you remember, that when all of this is gonna happen, and a lot of metal companies are going to be looked at favorably. So you have Vedanta, HCL, and also on and so forth. All of those people will deeply benefit from the whole situation, right? So metals essentially came up. What else can you think about? What do you think about real estate, right? What happens to real estate? Of course, Dubai's real estate is a big issue, right? They are facing a lot of problems, and Dubai had turned into a sort of a tax haven, right? Because it was basically zero tax play. And people used to be buying Dubai's properties because it used to be giving like a 6 to 9% yield, rental yield. Now, that used to be a hedge against uh, equivalent fall of Indian currency that used to be happening. So, Indian currency used to fall by 5 to 6% every year, and so people used to be buying these Dubai properties and they used to be giving like 6 to 9% of yield. Now, with all of these things, it becomes difficult for those investments to happen. Now, all of the investments that have already happened, they're going to be at a wait and watch mode. But the new investments take, they become difficult, right? So they sort of evaluate the situation. Monitoring the situation is the joke, right? Monitoring the situation. So that's what happens. Now, what else? What else can you think? What do you think happens to the Indian exports of, let's say, fruits and a lot of agri exports and a lot of exports in general? What do you think happens to them? What do you think happens to the pharma exports, right? Now, pharma exports might just get screwed. Why do you think pharma exports will get screwed? Because obviously, Strait of Hormuz goes through pharma, and then of course, China is the API supplier. China supplies all the APIs, India just makes the ready drugs, and then they go through the tools. So, pharma exports are going to be hurt. Now, when the whole situation happened and the Indian stock stumbled, pharma and metals didn't hold up, but pharma still has a sword down their neck, right? So that's gonna happen with pharma. Any export play, which is like electronics and so on and so forth, they obviously get hurt, right? Fruits are screwed too, says Mr. Tushar Tiwari. That is correct. Banana is the greatest export of India's when it comes to fruits, right? By volume, it's huge, and it has gotten screwed by a lot. So that is a big, big trouble, right? Let me give you some numbers when it comes to bananas. Uh, and the problem with fruits is that they are perishable, so that market essentially gets real tough, right? And what happens there is very difficult to fix. So what these people are trying to do is that they are trying to yet again, just as what happened when it came to US sanctions, that they were trying to find place in the domestic markets, right? So that's what they're trying to do. What do you think about insurance companies, right? With all of these things happening, insurance companies should not be feeling good because they'll have to pay a lot of, troubled things. Although some insurance will get more expensive, so they also get. But it's very bad time for reinsurance. They're repricing their own stuff because it's gonna be very difficult. So bananas, when you to look at bananas, 3,500 crores of yearly exports, right? 80% coming from Maharashtra, and Iraq takes 40%, Iran takes 70%, 17%, and UAE takes 12%. So West Asia, uh, including above countries, is 85 to 90%. So that is totally screwed. Uh, and that not just bananas, but of course the entire agri produce, and that's also perishable. So those guys, commodity traders, that totally get screwed. Mr. Tushar Tiwari says war is covered in insurance. Well, a lot of force majeure acts are being, invoked. Clauses are being invoked, but obviously some part of it is covered. So let's say if it's not directly related to war, uh, if the shipment gets back and so on and so forth, then you'll have to expect the insurance company to do something. But you're right, a lot of force majeure is being invoked, and it's to be seen. But it's definitely not a good time for uh, insurance play, right? I mean, it's a double-edged sword. At one time, you're gonna see a lot of insurance premiums to go up and so on and so forth. But then, on the other hand, there's also going to be some bad happenings, and when they happen, a lot of earnings will take a hit. So that's with insurance. Uh, what do you think about gold? Of course, right? So gold is, as predicted, gold is up. Gold is doing well. Gold had fallen a bit, uh, but it has been, if you look at a monthly play, it's still returning 6%, 7%. It had really fallen off the cliff from an all-time high, uh, but now it's back up. I mean, it's sort of doing well, right? So that's what's going up on. Uh, Gold and silver essentially went down. You know why? Because dollar had serious amount of inflows. The treasury essentially started looking green when it came to the entire fray, right? So a lot of money started going back to dollars, and that's why the gold got hurt. But on a midterm, even in short term, short, mid, long, gold is doing what it is essentially supposed to do. It's being a hedge against everything, right? When you look at the markets, how the markets essentially reacted to the entire war situation, you'll see South Korean market fell 11% and then came back uh, 9%. Then every other market, Hong Kong fell 2%, then came back, and so on and so forth. So if you look at Thursday's markets, they came back. On Wednesday, they were absolutely in the toilet. So that's exactly what happened with India as well. It got oversold and then it sort of creeped back again. So uh, everything else is pretty much where it was. Masdog as a stock, by the way, has surprisingly jumped 9%. 9% is huge, right? That is Masdog. Uh, and this is exactly what we had written in the Thinkers Frequency tracker. If you remember, we have a tracker going on. And in that tracker, we have marked Masdog as a share to watch out because of whatever it's doing, right? And it rose 9% just yesterday, right? In past 1 month, it's still down, so it still has a lot of room to grow. In the past year, it's just down, just up 5%. That's not cool. It'll definitely it should definitely see uh, some offshoots. So defense sector in the meanwhile has should be green, right? Because so much of geopolitical instability, so much of action happening should lead to renewed focus on defense, but that's not yet showing in the markets as of now, although it should. So let's see what happens there as well. And yeah, so this is slight sort of a run up to the entire situation. IT obviously is not going anywhere. We've talked about that, right? So let's see how this particular thing plays out. Stranded West Asia cargo sees anchor in local market. 38,000 containers stuck at Indian ports being taken back. Goods to be stored or sold domestically. So that's exactly what we told you. It's very difficult, right? These people are seeking government relief for all the exporters and so on and so forth. That's what they're supposed to do, right? Urea producers facing up to 40% of LNG supply cuts, as we've talked about. LNG comes from Qatar, right? Largest supplier, Qatar, due to the West Asia conflicts. By the way, city gas distributor Adani Gas has also asked its customers to keep the supply, consumption at 40% of its usual. If it goes above 40%, it's going to be charged at spot prices, which is obviously much, much higher. So it's leading to some turbulence in that market as well. Whenever something like this happens, our goal should be to be anti-fragile, right? How do you be anti-fragile? You be anti-fragile by betting on things that are supposed to get better when everything goes south, right? Sort of having an insurance product when everything gets worse. Gold is obviously that insurance product at the moment, and then there are other insurance products as well. So let's move on. Pharma exports likely to take a 4,000 crore knock. We've talked about that. India is tapping other crude suppliers, obviously looking back at Russia to make way for everything that's going on in the West Asian markets, right? Then we've talked about Dubai's reality boom. Oh, there's very interesting facet. It's called the subsea cables, right? The subsea cables have been attracting a lot of money, as we've discussed. Viewers of Thinkers Frequency would remember. Reliance has invested a lot in subsea cables, so have a lot of other companies. Subsea cables are very important for the whole data data penetration, and so on and so forth. That particular market is also obviously going to face threats because an Iranian ship has been torpedoed by an SSN in US based nuclear submarine. They actually drowned a particular Iranian vessel in Indian waters, so it was not in Iranian waters, and then got that has led to some focus on Indian SSN targets as well. India doesn't have nuclear submarines as yet. In fact, it's a, you know, incorporation in the whole in the Indian Navy is supposed to be taking 10 years. India was in talks with Russia about how it can work together on the whole nuclear submarine. It's very, very advanced, right? But India has a long way to go. So those Russians, it was supposed to have a refurbished play and then maintenance operations, then building of a Singh. That was a delivery date was 2025 itself. But Russia got engulfed in its war and that delivery had to be delayed. So that India is essentially relooking at a lot of defense investments. It has also uh, gotten about 5,000 crores when it comes to helicopters, so special sort of helicopters, and so on and so forth. So Indian defense obviously uh, reviewing itself in the face of this global uncertainty, right? Sovereign funds, of course, they were GCCs. A lot of investments were supposed to happen because the Dubai play, right? Dubai was essentially uh, sort of a satellite market, right? Which essentially, because of the time zone, because of stability, because of real estate and everything, it was a place which used to be a managing office for Indian GCCs, and this is where investments were rooted from. That has taken a toll. So those GCC conversations might go in a slight limbo, right? When that happens, it's gonna obviously lead to some employment problems in India. However, at the moment, Indian employment opportunities are pretty green. They're not bad at all, right? And some 12% rise. Although on quarter basis, not that great, but on year basis, it's looking okay. So, or did I say the opposite? The quarter on quarter basis is not looking that bad, although the year on year is not that great. Yeah. So let's move on. Uh, ECBs are obviously going to be difficult. External commercial borrowings. Would it be a good time for banking? What do you think it's going to lead to for banking? Is it going to be good for banking? What do you think, folks? How do you think this particular impact, even if it's just short term play or long term play or mid term play, how do you think would it be affecting the banking play? Can you guess? Can you guess what happens to the banking play because of this? Hmm? Come on, folks. Nobody? How do you think it's going to help the banking play or hurt the banking play, if at all? What do you think? Hmm? Nobody? Come on, folks. You should be able to say something. Nothing? Okay, so banking essentially there is a very good neutral, says Mr. Tushar Tiwari. That's neutral. It would be very awkward if it was just neutral because banking. So let's say more loans will be taken from banks. Correct. I agree with that assessment. Mr. Varun Bhardwaj says more loans. That'll essentially the loan book will be looking a bit, seeing a bit more activity. Although, if you look at the gold loans, right, they are breaking all records. So gold loans are going all over the place. It's just the AUM is hitting all-time highs, and it's just crazy whatever is happening with the gold loan play. So already, right, there are some signs of interesting happening. Although it is not an easy prediction because a lot of times what happens is these clauses are also used or these situations are also used to not pay back loans, and that might lead to higher delinquencies, higher NPAs, and so on and so forth. And if that happens, right, the banking essentially gets hurt for a long time because some things get hurt beyond repair, and then banking finds it difficult to recover its loans, right? But that's not happening for now. For now, it is you know, looking rather positive. So let's move forward. At this moment, it's more of a wait and watch game as it's supposed to be, because how else do you expect people to be managing this particular situation, right? So a lot of uh, wait and watch. Let's move forward. But banking, gold loans, essentially, because of the rising gold prices, are just killing it, right? So if you had bet on Muthoot Finance, and we talked about this years ago, not years ago, but months ago, whenever we started Thinkers Frequency. So let me look at Muthoot Finance share right now. From a year perspective, it's down. It's up 52%, and it's down from all-time highs. So let's look at that. We've talked about crude supplies and so on and so forth. Uh, Very interestingly, none of this war play has hurt the Indian automotive sector. Indian automotive sector is growing like never before. 21% bikes, 22% cars, 24% tractors, and so on and so forth. Just numbers are extraordinary. Whatever's happening to Indian automotive, it's just beautiful, right? Two wheelers, four wheelers, tractors, farm equipments, however, is not doing that well, but rest of the market is really killing it. 25% two wheelers, 26% passenger vehicles, four wheelers, 24% three wheelers, tractors 36%, of course, commercial vehicles 29%, and construction gear 0.1%. So really a really good time for Indian automotive sector. Automotive sector is benefiting from the consumer boom, the GST boom, and so on and so forth. Uh, but of course, the exports might just be slightly problematic. Let's move on, folks. Uh, Tech vacancies up 9% in March, signaling a short term uptick. Active demand 19% lower on a year on year basis, underlining declining trajectory but growing quarter on quarter. So, this is basically slight good news that's happening in the employment market, although it seems a slightly transitory. Transit. Let's move on, folks. There's an investigation by ET saying that the real money gaming app ban has not led to a fall in gaming activities, betting activities, because a lot of them are going through illegal means. Well, this insight seems to have a problem, right? Uh, Although these people are saying that sites remain easily accessible even with live UPI deposit option. So what these people have done is it's slightly superficial when it comes to their analysis. They see a live UPI link, they see a live website, and they think this is happening, everything is cool. What they don't realize is that the live UPI doesn't work without a human support, right? And that essentially causes friction, because without a payment gateway, without a frictionless way of collecting money, what you essentially do is you do a UPI transaction, and then that UPI transaction has to be manually put on the live website, the betting website, and that essentially is very difficult, right? So these people just looked at websites and they thought that it's booming, but it's actually not. So don't trust this report. Let's move on. Aluminium stocks may pause after sharp run up. Aluminium stocks, like all metal stocks, really doing well. By the way, Japanese and Korean exports to India, steel exports, have also faced problems. Why do you think Japanese and Korean steel exports to India started facing problems? Can you guess, folks? I think you can guess it. Why do you think Japanese and Korean, uh, you know, steel exports to India started facing unprecedented scrutiny, right? There is a one word answer for it. It's actually uh, two words clubbed into one, if you can say that. But you know it. So would you like to take a shot at it? Why do you think Japanese and Korean steel exports to India dumping by who? They don't dump. So it's Chinese rerouting concerns. So India had essentially placed anti-dumping duties on steel to protect its industry. That's working well for Indian steel, Indian metals, right? And the fear was that Japanese and Korean exports to India might also be in that particular direction. And to draw that close, right, they face problems, and that's sort of surprising because they do not. BH China. Correct, correct, Mr. Bhardwaj. Let's move on. Fresh registrations of companies and LLPs scale new peak. Company registrations up 41%, LLPs soaring 44% in India. That essentially signals a strong grassroots entrepreneurship market, right? We've talked about how jobs are to be judged in a holistic fashion. So, whenever you're looking at job numbers, you've got to be looking at uh, new company formations, you've got to be looking at loan numbers, you've got to be looking at uh, companies closures, right? So if just new companies are forming and company closures are not happening, that means that it's a structural issue, that companies are not being able to close, right? And that then that metric becomes unreliable, it becomes polluted. However, if companies closure, if there's a good churn in number of companies getting formed and number of companies closing down, you can consider it a form of employment, and then holistically judge where the employment market is going, right? Maybe there's a lot of entrepreneurial activity. This is in relevance to the last story that we just discussed, right? Let's move on, folks. We've talked about aluminium. MOSPI to step up coverage of high frequency eco indicators. High frequency indicators. MOSPI is Ministry of Statistical Program Implementation, Statistics and Program Implementation, of course. These are the data guys of India. They've done a remarkably good job over the course of the last few years. I mean, they've been very reliable. The data they've been coming out with has been scrutinized at all levels, and it's been pretty reliable, right? They are trying to come up with ISP. ISP is something for services, just like IIE is for industrial production, right? ISP is definitely for services play. So that's gonna be helping India to measure its service industry in a slightly more high frequency kind of a way, very reliably, right? And by the way, India also changed its GDP base year from 2014 to 2022, 2023. Now that's going to lead to a lot of rigmarole when it comes to new numbers, right? As that happens, you're going to see some numbers getting uh, downwardly revised, or let's say even upwardly. So it's gonna change something. For now, Indian GDP numbers are pretty much where they were, 7.3, 7.4. That's the kind of stuff they were looking at, and that's pretty much on. Let's move on, folks. We've talked about indexes, banking up, supplies go cold, metals blow hot. We've talked about that. How interesting is that? That in the last session we've talked about uh, metal stocks might just be looking favorable, and you know, in this week it's absolutely what's happening. So National Aluminium Company changed by 9.4% month on month positive. Hindalco 2.3, Lloyd's negative. JSW Steel 0.7% up in a day, 3% up. How interesting is that? And these people are saying that it's gonna continue. So that's pretty amazing. Let's move on, folks. Uh, Rupee. We in our run up of whatever happens to India, we forgot to discuss what it'll do for rupee, right? We forgot the most important part, the inflationary impact of the entire exercise. So India obviously is an import heavy nation, and most of the imports we do are of energy imports. When we are importing so much of energy, when we are importing so much of oil, the price, if the price of that commodity goes up, it leads to a serious strain on the national exchequer. When it leads to that serious strain on the national exchequer, it might and it will definitely impact the inflation number. So for now, nothing that the world has been going through has affected India, because our inflation has been at somewhere around 1.8%, 2.4, and so on and so forth, which has been very, very benign, right? It's been very, very cool. But what happens if the crude goes up, and rupee essentially starts going down, because dollar flows in and so on and so forth? What happens to that, right, is inflation numbers start changing. And when inflation numbers start changing, everything starts hurting India. For if you remember the whole last 1.5 years, nothing hurt India, because the RBI chose to cut rates time and again, because the inflation was tight, right? Inflation was benign, it was great. But if inflation starts coming up, then the problems come home, and that's gonna be very interesting to see, right? For now, rupee has soared. Rupee has sort of come back. It was really doing not doing well, but RBI came in to support it, started selling dollars and so on and so forth, right? Closes at 91.6, up from previous of 92.15. More central bank intervention likely. Central bank will have to intervene. Until now, central bank was pretty sort of in a passive way okay with rupee going down, because it led to a lot of exports competitiveness, because if rupee goes down, exports become competitive, right? The currency devaluation play. But that's not going to stand if the national inflation, domestic inflation, starts creeping up, right? So let's move forward, folks. Brent is up by 84 to $84. It might just go up by $200. That is not cool. Let's move on. Dollar eclipsing, gold getting hurt, but only in the short term. Let's move on. Oil marketing companies, upstream companies up, refineries up, oil marketing companies down. We've already discussed that. RBI bond buys help steady yields, offset liquidity drain. That's okay. We've already talked about automotive sector doing really well. Share of sub 9 bank loans rise with fallen rates. Number of borrowers fell by 13 million year on year in December 2025. Outstanding loans rise to 194 lakh crores, right? So below 9, share of loans, bank loans below 9%, right, going up from 42% to 62% up. What does this mean for banking, right? It is not a good news, of course, right? If if low interest rates essentially start rising, right? If low interest rates start rising, the net interest margin essentially starts getting hurt, and that starts painting a slightly uncomfortable position for banking, although it will, uh, right? It's not gonna be an existential threat, of course. Let's move on. Number of borrowers down from 383 million to 370 million. Borrowers charged at 13% and above, down from 207 million to 192 million. Now, this particular news does not look that positive for banking, as we've been saying. However, it is a transitory play, right? And it should lead to an uptick in other places. Let's move on, folks. Estee Lauder has taken full control of Forest Essentials. Essentials is a luxury cosmetics, you can call it, or uh, you know, can you call it a beauty company? It's bath essentials and so on and so forth. So that company has gotten acquired. 49% in the Ayurvedic brand is already owned by Estee Lauder. It's now up. It's going to buy the remaining 51%, and it's tying up for localization. Forest Essentials has a very beautiful story. It's a very inspiring story. It was founded by Miss Meera Kulkarni in her mid 40s as a passion project in 2000. So the company was born in 2000, and now she is the MD. At 69, she's looking at exiting the company. It's doing a revenue of 578 crores, right? Revenue growth is 18% year on year, uh, with net profit of 128 crores. So basically, you are looking at 578 crores to 128 crores. That is just phenomenal. That is absolutely phenomenal. That is about 18%, if I'm not wrong. Let me just pull out the calculator. 128 of 578. 22%, I was a bit wrong. 22% of net margins. That is just extraordinary, right? That is out of the park, right? Forest Essentials. Haven't heard much about Forest Essentials, says Mr. Abhishek Sharma. Well, how could you have not? Forest Essentials is extremely popular with females. The bath products and so on and so forth, bath bombs, bath oils, and so on and so forth. They are extremely popular. So it's sort of a premium bath, or a cosmetic company, you can say. It's definitely nothing to do with males much, right? But it's extremely popular, and then you can see and it still, since it deals with a premium positioning, you can see how well organized or how well run the machine is with 22% net margins. That's just extraordinary. Let's look at what they are getting acquired for, right? So, what is the valuation that they are being bought at? Is that mentioned somewhere here? No, it is not. Uh, let's look at Forest Essentials valuation. 8,000 crores. 8,000 crores. That is extremely nice, right? So at a revenue of 578 crores, let's say 600 crores, it's getting bought at 8,000 crores valuation. What would be the revenue multiple of this company? 8,000. 13x. 13x is huge. 13x is nice. Very well deserved. Also pretty much an outlier in this domain, right? So, Forest Essentials getting acquired. Hats off to Madam Meera Kulkarni, right? She's done exceedingly well. Best wishes. Very inspiring story also, right? She started in a room of hers and so on and so forth. Started making soaps and stuff, right? And that sort of led to this huge company. Oh. Hello. I'm sorry, I went offline. I'm sorry if you faced any problem, folks. I went offline for a second. I accidentally refreshed the tab. So yeah, Forest Essentials getting acquired. Let's move on, folks. FMCG companies Q3 sales hit. GST cut, forced supply pricing tweaks. That's okay. Let's move on. Warehousing demand sees robust growth on Make in India PLI push. So that is very much in line with what we've been saying for a very long time. Warehousing as a play is extremely important for the country. The first thing is obviously logistics, right? When you're building a manufacturing setup, so you're thinking about the manufacturing setup, but it's a chicken and egg problem. If if there's no smooth logistics, manufacturing, it's difficult, right? So you first lay down the roads and so on and so forth. Once there are some connectivity linkages and so on and so forth, you have some manufacturing units. But what's next? What's the most important thing next? It's obviously the logistics, right? And even then, what's the next most important thing? It's logistics. So India has been a very backward nation when it comes to logistics, warehousing, container manufacturing, and so on and so forth. But now we are gearing up, and that is seeing uh, a real 29% year-on-year growth in industrial warehousing market, 72.5 million square feet absorption last year, right? Manufacturing occupiers drove demand, contributing 47% of total volumes. Now, this is yet again a vindication of everyone who bet against whatever Mr. Raghuram Rajan was saying. Mr. Raghuram Rajan said, if you remember, that investing in manufacturing is a lost cause for a country like India. It should think about how to do more in services. That's what he said, right? And he said because services is India's strength and so on and so forth. Glad nobody listened to him, at least the ruling dispensation, because services do not have these second order effects. Manufacturing has second order effects which are basically unparalleled, right? So when you're setting up a manufacturing unit, the multiplication factor of every rupee spent or every rupee that goes into it is just many-fold that as compared to services, and you can see how, right? So manufacturing companies, they got some Make in India PLI push, and the second industry which started propping up was the warehousing real estate consumption, right? Now Mr. Abhishek Sharma says, yep, I recall that, and you were spot on the counter argument. Thank you, Mr. Sharma. Now, this is actually getting proven like beyond a reasonable doubt that he was not just wrong on all accounts. It was just unbelievable how wrong he was, right? It was just almost criminal. How could somebody give such a wrong advice, right? Now, what you're seeing is a lot of action happening as far as warehousing uh, occupancy. Now, next bit you're gonna see is container manufacturing, which is also a very small part of India's manufacturing play. We don't make a lot of containers and so on and so forth. Now you're gonna see a lot of that also happening in times to come. So if you look at the demand surge led by manufacturing occupiers, excluding fast moving consumer goods and fast moving consumer durables, accounting for 47%, translating to a 55% growth in area absorbed. This is very, very good news because this means that now everything has second order effects, right? Now, what do you see is the second order effect of warehousing going up? Can you guess? Can you guess how warehousing growth will lead to India's what would be the next step when it comes to warehousing uh, growth? Can you guess which particular industry will be favored? Where this money will go? Warehousing play? Can you guess that? You can guess. We've talked about this. So, and since we think in terms of real estate is obviously logistics is is the industry itself. So no prizes for getting logistics and real estate because that's first level, right? You build a warehouse, real estate gets second level. What do you think is the second level? You're building warehouses. What do you think? Which industry do you think is going to benefit a lot? Warehouses, let's say, let me give you a hint of warehouses of electronics products or high sensitive, uh, you know, construction is obviously, it's just a part of real estate, so let's not count that. Mr. Sharma, Mr. Bhaviksha. E-commerce is obviously one of the, you know, things that is leading to it's the reason for this warehousing revolution, if you can call it that. Next. These are things that lead to uh, manufacturing of that, or let's say development of those facilities, right? All right, the answer is air conditioning, heating, air packaging, of course. Air conditioning is the answer. Air conditioning, heating, uh, you know, air monitoring, and so on and so forth, because those particular things are very necessary to keep things in a good state. So what wherever preservation of a particular place considered, you know, you'll see that. And then of course there's a lot of equipment manufacturing play that sort of gets help. You know, a lot of robotics that warehousing absorbs in the country, can absorb in the country. So all of those things only possible because of manufacturing, not because of services. Let's move on, folks. Undersea cable, we've talked about that. Alternative routes. Pharma exports may take up to $500 million hit. Freight costs rise. Costs for bulk drugs. Chinese API is more expensive. Shipping lines. So at one point you're seeing the raw material prices rise for the pharma guys. The APIs coming from APIs, KSMs coming from China, and on the other hand you're seeing the shipping prices go up. So raw materials go up, Transporting prices go up, margins go down, companies get screwed. Let's move on. How simple was that? Summation. Let's move on. Sovereign wealth funds may go sovereign with oil revenue set to drop 1.3 billion, 33% drop in investments. That's not cool. Let's move on. That was today. Let me just check if I'm missing out on anything. You just gotta be thorough. We are very thorough, but gotta be extremely tight so we don't miss out on anything. How did you like this episode, by the way? I didn't dwell too much on the war play, right? No geopolitical play. Although it's very interesting how Israel and Iran had sort of a TV finish, right? They were calling it a 12-day war. They were saying 12-day war is a great play, and they wanted it to go in the history books, right, as the 12-day war which solved all problems. And then they found out that Iran was essentially building bunker-style nuclear development play, and they found out that if they are successful in creating that weapon or something of that sort, Israel is done, and they had to intervene, they said, and they did. So very weird, but let's move on. Lot of Commerce Ministry trying its best to monitor the situation. Green energy, yeah, we shouldn't have missed this, thank God. India's renewable energy expansion is keenly watched, right? Decarbonization and so on and so forth. Green energy is led by solar, which anchors countries' 272 gigawatt non-fossil sources. 35 gigawatt added this financial year alone. So 272, that means about 12 to 13% of solar is being added in a year, which is huge, right? Country advances towards is 500 gigawatt target by 2030. So if you see FY26 capacity addition, 43 non-fossil fossil addition, 43 gigawatt, right? And solar is 35 out of that 43, essentially 34.95. So 44, if we are adding 44 gigawatts of non-fossil based energy, right, capacity, 35% of it is solar, which is just extraordinary, right? Global leadership is of course of China. Their renewable capacity is at 2000 gigawatts, 2151. United States is the next best. It has 472, basically, nowhere, one fifth. India is at 254. And India is targeting 500 gigawatts by 2030. So that's what we are looking at. This has led to a drop in equipment imports, right? Solar modules, they were like $4 billion worth of solar modules were imported in FY24. It came down to 2 billion, and now it's 400 million. So in just a couple of years, 3 years, it's down to almost 1/5 to 1/10. So we are doing some sort of module or part manufacturing as well. That's what we are aiming for. Solar modules, solar cells, 144 gigawatts worth of solar modules being made in India. So that's huge. That's very impressive, and that's very important also. So if you look at the ethanol play, right, ethanol blending as a concept, we talked about how ethanol blending faced a real problem, right? Because there was more supply than demand, and demand was sort of getting capped, and supply was huge because they had anticipated more growth. Now, not a lot of growth is happening when it comes to ethanol. Could that be a foreign conspiracy to essentially, the campaign against ethanol? Could it be an attack against India in a very subtle form? Because ethanol blending essentially reduced the imports of crude for the country, and it led to India's independence, so to speak, in energy. And that essentially gets hurt if the whole automotive sector doesn't revolutionize itself, right? So as ethanol blending led to 6% of efficiency
troubles and some knocking troubles in Indian cars which were not equipped to handle E20. Do you think E28 or further blending of ethanol is not is being stopped by some sort of anti-campaigning against that particular idea, because that is very important for Indian energy independence and also import bills. If India starts stops importing all that crude, or let's say reduces the import of all that crude, Indian rupee can also benefit. But India is also importing corn for ethanol, so decreasing oil import doesn't make much sense. Mr. Abhishek Sharma. But corn is a much cheaper, uh, you know, commodity, and the final product which it leads to is way more valuable. And also, corn imports are being allowed to happen now, right after the US deal. But that doesn't mean that all the corn that India uses to make ethanol, it essentially is imported. In fact, corn has very little to do with ethanol in India. Indian ethanol production is more towards utilizing the waste that Indian farms produce, as per Mr. Nitin Gadkari. So that again is not a very favorable narrative for India, because the whole ethanol blending exercise and ethanol production for India was supposed to be helping the country attain energy independence. So let's see what happens there. But for now, we are doing very well in solar. Let's move on. Railways are looking at a bullet train cost overrun of 90,000 crores. That's an 83% land acquisition delay cost that they're having to bear, and they're doing it. So they're saying that we're going to take it. Let's move on. Obviously, they don't have any other option. Loan demand shooting up. Gold loan 69% up in FY24. We've talked about this. Not going to say it again. Some GPUs are underutilized when it comes to India, right? There are three levels to it: committed, allocated, utilized. The utilization numbers of Indian GPUs is not that high. 38% of 33,000 committed GPUs assigned workloads, which is not good. So these companies are saying we're just going to sell it outside. Let's move on, folks. Luxury brands. Very interestingly, people are saying that the zero emission norms or zero emission definitions of cars should be rethought of. Right now, it's all tailpipe emission, and they're saying tailpipe emission should not be how you view it, because there should be a lifetime load on the earth, right? Lifetime carbon addition because of the vehicle, and that also should account for all the batteries and so on and so forth. So electric vehicles might just lose their zero emission tag, which is very interesting. Let's move on, folks. There's a very interesting case that's going on, that is of the insolvent telecom companies like Aircel, Reliance, and so on and so forth. Now, they were insolvent, they can't pay back, but they had some spectrum that they had bought. Now, what happens to the spectrum? Does that spectrum get auctioned, right? And becomes a part of the asset reconstruction play, right? Or is that spectrum a national asset which is to be given back to the country, right? That is the legal play that's going on. DOT is seeking clarity on dues of insolvent companies. Steps to get spectrum back following SC ruling that AFAs cannot be transferred as financial assets. So even though you bought the spectrum and now you're bankrupt, somebody will be buying the bankrupt play or whatever. You cannot be buying spectrum at a discounted price or whatever, which generally happens with the asset reconstruction play, right? Stressed assets, you cannot do that, right? So that is a very interesting play. GLP drug, Eli Lilly says that it's going to be selling its terzepatide drug, right? The Wegovy thing, not at a discount. So even though Novo Nordisk's patent expires of semaglutide, and a lot of generics are going to come, which are going to be very cheap. Eli Lilly is going to stick to its price point. Now, how do you think it's going to work out for Eli to stick to its premium price point for the tirzepatide? They say it does a much better job than semaglutide. Is it a good strategy? Do you think the price conscious Indian population will look at cheaper drug? Or do you think when it comes to drugs, Indians won't be looking at saving money? Where do you think this particular strategy will go? Speaking of strategy, right, Zydus essentially was one of the front runners when it came to GLP-1 drugs in 2010, but it shelved the clinical development project due to costs. So Zydus, an Indian company, could have been one of the pioneers when it came to GLP drugs, right? But it stopped. It just abandoned the project because of cost. Because that's what Indian pharma companies do. They're traders, essentially. They take APIs from China and they just package it in a way and they send it abroad. So they don't make anything of their own. In this particular case, they could have come out with a research oriented project, which would have been pretty good. Unfortunately, couldn't happen. It's one of those legendary stories, right? Zydus had ZYOG1, had a DGCI nod for phase 1 clinical trials in 2010, right? A high development cost, they let it go, right? Now this particular market is above $100 billion, so they lost out because that's what they do, right? No push on R&D, no appetite on R&D for R&D, and that's what happens. Let's move on, folks. 5,000 crores for helicopters and wheels still missiles. We've talked about that. We've talked about LNG. We've talked about yeah. That's good. Summer has come early. So what do you think is going to be the effect of early summers, folks? Can you guess where early summers will lead to? You remember what happened due to early monsoon, right? And prolonged monsoons led to some problems to some industries. You remember those industries, right, which faced problems due to prolonged monsoons and early monsoons? Do you remember that? You remember that, right? Don't you? I guess you do. AC companies were not happy. Ice cream companies were not happy. Beverage companies were not happy. You remember, right? Early summers have led to good news for those folks. So that's what's happening. That's very interesting. Let's move on. Ice cream beverages as well, says Mr. Abhishek Sharma. Correct. It's so easy for us now to actually just think about something and predict. And a lot of times our predictions are pretty bang on, which is awesome, which is a pretty good skill. We are developing that muscle, which is awesome. Electronics exports of $4.5 billion at risk. Consumer companies problems. Kitchen staples may soar. We've talked about that. Airline companies are obviously screwed because they cannot go through many routes. So no time. Let's look at what's happening with Indigo stock. Indigo stock. 5 days down by 4%. 1 month down by 10%. 6 months down by 22%. 1 year down by 7%. So yeah, 6 months. The worst horizon for Indigo. Let's move on. Energy costs, shipping, play, rate to be stable, policy rate to be current and lower. There's a lot of work happening with Ola, by the way, went out of the top 5 when it comes to Indian electric two-wheelers. If you remember, Ola was number 1. Ola is out. It has been replaced by Crompton Greaves, the Ampere Play. Right, they're out. They're number 5. So that's what's going on with Ola. Who told you first? I told you first. Let's move on, folks. I called out on the cab aggregation and uh, the whole Ola play way before anybody. Let's move on. GST collections are 8.1% up, right? Robust import revenues and steady consumption keeps collections stable. That's what's happening. Let's move on. We talked about Motown doing well, automotive holding on. Awesome. India and Canada inking a uranium critical minerals pact. Again, just because there's one trouble doesn't mean the other has disappeared. Chinese rare earth play is still a problem. Let's move on, folks. So India is diversifying its supplies. It also has its mining play in place. Let's move on. Pharma metal holds out. We've talked about that. The rich go for gold. We've talked about gold loans. Is it a good time to buy Muthoot Finance? Right? Because it's fallen off the cliff a little. Maybe, maybe not. But yeah, definitely a good long-term story. Let's move on. I hope I'm not missing out on anything. GCC is bracing for near-term impact. We've talked about that. Right. Japan, Korea, we've talked about that as well. Cooking oil prices might go up in the wholesale market. That is something we've discussed already. Manufacturing has risen 4-month high, and IIP growth has slowed to 3-month low of 4.8. Now these numbers are not that important because you've got to have a 6-month or 9-month view, but it's pretty solid that manufacturing is essentially, IIP has slowed down because of the high base effect as well. CAD, current account deficit, has widened to 1.3% of GDP because of higher goods trade deficit. Current account deficit is not a great thing, but we are working on that. PF interest rate has been 8.25%, which is good news for people. Those are some macroeconomic indicators. Sub 10,000 smartphones are going to be out of business, as discussed. We've talked about that. Now these people are saying the same thing. We talked about that last week, actually. Let's move on, folks. Yeah, we're not missing out on anything. We are pretty solid. We are pretty solid. Just 5 more minutes and we'll be set. You can ask me questions till then. We've talked about, yeah. Good. We are pretty solid. A rise in sales of BlackBerry and feature phones is up. Now, who told you that? I was the one. I was trying to build Seneca because a lot of people are looking at digital detox as a very important tool, right? That's shaping up exactly as predicted. Let's move on, folks. We've talked about how Block fired 4,000 people, 40% of its workforce. Jack Dorsey, the founder of Twitter and also Block, was Square, right? Essentially, because it's basically AI washing, right? The company was not doing that well anyway. Now instead of actually firing people through straight means, he says AI, and then it helps the stock. It's not necessarily having to do anything with AI. It's not like he was actually saving money because he was like doing $66 million parties. But yeah, for now, that's what it is. New GDP series timeline. Yeah. So because of the whole GDP uh, evaluation play, right now we are at 3.79. We were supposed to move towards Japan's 4 trillion play. Now that recalibration essentially uh, it'll push it to FY28, right? The whole recalibration is going to lead to India crossing the 4 trillion mark, crossing Japan by FY 2028, which is a pretty interesting play, right? The new GDP series using 2022 2023 as the base year. FY27 GDP growth is going to be raised to 7 to 7.4%, says CEA, Mr. Anant Narayanan, right? But yeah, the absolute numbers take an effect. Japanese company Proterial plans to make magnets and more in India. Of course, this is once again a reaction to the Chinese play, the rare earth mineral play. Let's move on, folks. Done, folks. We are very happy. We have covered everything. We are pretty up to date. I hope you had fun. I hope you liked the episode. I hope you learned something. I definitely learned a lot. It's because of you I end up reading every day and in depth. So I read a lot thanks to you. Thanks because I have to do this, so I have to be thorough. And because I have to be very, very clear of my understanding of things, I cannot skip reading. So thank you for being here. I hope it adds value to you as well. I hope you uh, adds a lot of value. Our Thinkers Frequency Tracker is doing well. We keep you posted. It was fun. Thanks for your time, says Mr. Abhishek Sharma. Let me thank Mr. Tushar Tiwari, Mr. Bhavik Shah, Mr. Abhishek Sharma, Mr. Varun Bhardwaj, and everybody else who joined. Please take care. Have a beautiful week ahead. See you when I have a little more hair. Whoa! Bye bye.